Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. My name's Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about the painting learning curve and the importance of being rubbish. So I've read a couple of articles this week and a couple of posts, and I was just thinking about new gamers coming into the hobby and perhaps considering picking up the brush for the first time. And it just occurred to me that if I was to give some advice to someone who is on the cusp of becoming a new gamer and a new painter, is that you can't hit the ground running in this hobby, certainly when it comes to painting. There's lots of products that are coming online, you know, that have been around for a few years, everything from contrast paints to speed paints and all the different variations on it, that are aimed at getting figures done and on the table in a very fast time, and there is a place for that. And you know, don't get me wrong, I own some contrast paints, but I do and use them and enjoy them. So I'm not criticism necessarily of contrast paints. It's a criticism of the concept that you can bypass that learning stage and avoid those early days of being rubbish at everything. Now, I don't want to give the impression that just because I'm middle-aged that somehow I'm backwards-looking, nostalgic, some old curmudgeon. I'm very forward-looking. I enjoy new technologies and new techniques, and I'm always looking forward to what the future might bring. I'm excited for it. My body may be starting to show its advancing years, or slowly advancing years, I hope. But up here, I'm young and excited, the same as I've always been. So it's important for me to say that, because I think there is a risk of becoming immediately responding to the new and going, oh, that's a bad thing. Far from it. Things like contrast paints, for instance, I think they've got a fantastic place. I've used them on a few figures. I've experimented with them, done things perhaps with them that perhaps the designers weren't intending to use contrast paints for. They have a place now in the field of techniques that I have learned, developed, and if not mastered, then certainly got to grips with. But I do think that there is a risk that these sort of products will encourage new gamers, new painters in particular, to bypass those early stages where they learn the real craft of painting figures. Those stages when you don't get anything right and it doesn't work, but you learn by doing. And the products that sort of skip to the chase, that bypass those early stages, that give you instant gratification and an acceptable result, will ultimately harm your ability to paint and your enjoyment of the hobby in the long run. If painting's your thing, I appreciate it isn't everybody's. So as I say, when I suggest that there are downsides to new products like that, it's not because I'm rebelling against the new. Far from it. I just worry that there's a new generation of gamers, painters, taking the fast route and missing a lot as a result. There's definitely something to be said for learning the hard way. To take a sidestep slightly from this, 30 years or more ago, when I was at uni, I remember going to a lecture with this grizzled old professor giving the talk, and he was making an impassioned plea for being crap. He argued quite successfully, as far as I was concerned, that making mistakes is the fastest route to learning and improvement, and that we should never be frightened of it. Whether you're launching a rocket, Mr. Musk, we know that might blow up. You do it anyway because you're going to learn a lot from the process. Or if you're a student making a hash of your first essay, you do it anyway for the feedback. Or a painter making a mess of their first models, not getting it right, because they'll learn stuff along the way and the next figure will be better. They'll investigate and learn new techniques. It's a truism that perhaps not everyone appreciates, that making mistakes is an important step towards learning. It's an important learning opportunity. Learning is enhanced by making mistakes, and students of all different disciplines learn persistence and new techniques as a result of their early mistakes. Failure builds resilience in people. It makes us more creative because we try and find ways around the mistakes that we made earlier. And sometimes that may be just a matter of going to someone who knows how to do it and learning directly from them, or it may be developing your own solutions. But of course, if you've bypassed that being crap stage and jumped straight to producing an acceptable quality, and there's nothing wrong with an acceptable quality miniature done with contrast paints, but I would argue that there's a whole different level of painting that they're missing out on and will probably never learn as a result of having stepped past those early stages and getting things wrong. To be blunt, bypassing the balls up stage for an instant solution like contrast paints is an opportunity lost, in my opinion. Of course, it's also important at this stage to say that painting isn't everyone's bag. We're wargamers at the end of the day. A significant portion of us enjoy the painting side of our hobby, but many don't, and that's fine. That's quite acceptable. This is a broad church hobby, whatever solution works for you. But I would tentatively urge new gamers out there who have discovered contrast paints and think, oh, this is a great way into the hobby. It is. It's a gateway, but don't overlook learning other skills along the way. There's a lot that can be learned by learning to dry brush and shade and use washes that you're skipping past by going straight to a contrast paint. Now, don't get me wrong, contrast paint will produce a perfectly good looking model. As I say, I've got a growing collection of contrast paints that I use, so that there's nothing wrong with that. But there is an importance to learning new techniques and improving one model after another, and that slow accumulation of knowledge. If you're the sort of person that just wants to pay someone else to paint your miniatures, then you can ignore this video because you're not going to be interested at all. But if you have any aspirations to being a painter, and if you're new to the hobby, as I say, to repeat myself, don't overlook the opportunities afforded to you by making mistakes and getting things wrong, because you'll learn lessons on how to paint that will stay with you for the rest of your painting career, for however long that is. I'm not overlooking the fact that there are ways that contrast paints, for instance, do make the hobby more accessible to some people, but it's also it doesn't let you develop that sort of nerdy craftsmanship that comes from doing it the long way, the old way. So, as usual, having rambled a little bit there, I want to ask, what do you think? Are you, like me, a painter who's been painting for donkey's years and has learned through bitter mistakes new ways of doing things and has learned the craft? I don't by any means think I'm a great painter, but I'm a reasonable quality painter. I'm happy with what I produce, and I've learned how to do that through years of trial and error, and looking up YouTube videos and buying tutorial DVDs and all sorts of things, learning stuff from other people. But or are you the sort of gamer? You're new to the hobby. Have you only ever used contrast paints? In which case, I hope this video sort of spurred you to sort of go back and have a look at other techniques that you might have completely bypassed. Or are you somewhere in between? Do you use both sort of techniques, modern techniques and more speedier techniques? As always, I'd love to hear what you think, what your experience is, what the pros and the cons are of learning the hard way or taking the short route. As always, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. I hope you found today's video interesting, and of course if you did, please like, subscribe and share, and if you want to keep up to date with my videos, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, look after yourself, keep gaming, and of course keep rolling high.